When Melania Trump entered the studio, the room didn't change through sound but through a brief collective pause. No applause, no murmurs, just a subtle adjustment in posture from everyone present. She wore a tailored, midnight blue coat dress and cream-colored pumps. Without many words, just a soft "good day" to the floor manager, barely audible over the hum of the cameras. It was her first appearance on a political discussion panel since the beginning of her husband's second term, and her presence alone was already news. The panel was promoted under the theme Civility in Modern Politics, bipartisan, polite. But the tension wasn't in the event title. It was 3 seats away. Sitting there was Jasmine Crockett, Congresswoman from Texas, known for her sharp words, uncompromising stance, and willingness to confront power directly. Jasmine had built a reputation by openly criticizing performative leadership styles, especially those hiding behind politeness to avoid accountability. Recently, her comments had been directed at the First Lady, not by name, but clearly enough. The studio was modern, with deep gray walls, glass tables, and backlit logos. 4 panelists, 1 moderator, no live audience, only millions watching on screens. From the start, a quiet tension filled the room, not hostile, just carefully calibrated. Moderator Steve Barkley, a seasoned broadcast journalist from Rochester, began with gentle opening questions. What does political civility mean today? Can disagreement coexist with respect? Melania's answers were brief but elegantly phrased. We should speak with intention, not with noise, she said. True strength isn't loud. Jasmine only slightly raised an eyebrow, just enough for the viewers to notice, and replied, "Sometimes noise is the only thing heard after being ignored for too long." Some laughed, not all, but enough. That set the tone for the next 20 minutes. Jasmine's words came fast and sharp, while Melania's responses were cool and measured. No interruptions, no shouting, but something was building between the lines. When asked whether the White House bore any responsibility for the rising political tension, Melania calmly responded, "I can't be responsible for other people's reactions, only for my own words." Jasmine replied instantly, "But silence is also a reaction." No shouting, no drama, just a quiet simmer that most viewers would only notice much later. What no one knew, not even the panelists, was that the green light on the mic panel had shifted from red to yellow, a sign that the wireless microphones were still active, still live. The moderator closed the segment with, "We'll take a short commercial break, stay with us." The cameras pulled back, the broadcast feed was cut, and that's when it happened. But the thing is, sometimes the real show begins when the cameras stop rolling. The studio lights dimmed slightly, signaling a break. Crew members moved quietly, adjusting earpieces, handing out water bottles, but the atmosphere stayed charged. Melania sat back, legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. She didn't look at Jasmine, but her posture changed, less camera-ready, more deliberate. Jasmine, half turned toward the moderator, chuckled at something another panelist said, when Melania leaned forward. Not a dramatic gesture, just a subtle tilt of her head to close the distance. What she said wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. "You should be careful who you challenge," she said softly, her accent clear, her voice low. "Some of us never forget." Jasmine didn't respond immediately. Her eyes blinked once, slowly. Then she turned her head, calmly, like someone moving a chess piece before making the next move. "Oh," she said lightly, her expression neutral. "Was that a threat?" Melania offered a faint smile, not warm, not cold, just unreadable. The kind of smile that leaves you unsure if it's a warning, a reminder, or something else entirely. Neither woman raised her voice, but the entire exchange was captured, clearly, cleanly, on the backup audio feed in the control room. Angela Russo, a young editing assistant who'd only been working at WNYT for 6 months, was the first to hear it. She was on the night shift, sitting alone in the back corner of the editing bay when the words came through her headphones. She stopped, rewound, played it again. It was quiet, almost casual, but the meaning was unmistakable. Angela wasn't authorized to save the off-air feed, but she did anyway. 20 seconds. A whisper, a reminder, attention not meant for the light of day, and for that reason, it changed everything. She saved the clip, added subtitles, just for herself, and eventually sent it to her roommate Jade, a freelance contributor to a political YouTube channel. They had a pact. If either of them ever heard the truth, they'd share it. Jade forwarded the clip, first to a friend, then to someone with a verified account, and within an hour it was everywhere. Twitter exploded, TikTok followed, then Facebook. Hot mic moment, Melania Trump whispers to rapper Jasmine Crockett, "Hear it for yourself." A shaky screen recording, captured in the editing room, showed the scene. Frozen faces, still bodies, and then, "You should be careful who you challenge. Some of us never forget." Social media lost its mind. Hashtags like Hot Melania, Careful Jasmine, and Civility Queen trended simultaneously. Within 12 hours, the clip had over 8 million views. Commentators began dissecting every breath, every syllable. Was it a threat? A warning? Was this how the First Lady spoke when she thought no one was listening? CNN played the clip 3 times in one segment. Fox News dedicated an entire hour. MSNBC invited 2 linguists to analyze the tone. But what really mattered wasn't just what was said, it was who it was said to. Because Jasmine Crockett was not a woman who hid behind soft words. She had made her name by speaking plainly, by refusing to shrink, by never backing down. So the question wasn't just, did Melania say something wrong? It was, what would Jasmine say now? The answer came quickly. No official statement, no interview, just a tweet. 10 words, some hide behind quiet voices. I don't. No hashtag, no name, but it hit like a grenade. Within minutes, the tweet was shared thousands of times. Supporters rallied, online and offline. In Fort Worth, Jasmine's hometown, local outlets began contacting her team. Former interns gave anonymous quotes. Jasmine hadn't been surprised. She'd recognized those coded power plays for years. She'd called them out before. Meanwhile, Melania's press office remained silent. No denial, no explanation. And that silence only made everything louder. On one side, why won't she clarify? On the other, she doesn't owe anyone an explanation. And somewhere in the middle, millions watching it unfold like an unscripted political drama, unsure whether to be outraged or impressed. Behind the scenes, Jasmine's team worked around the clock. Messages flooded in, some threatening, some grateful, many confused. Dion Shields, Jasmine's press secretary, slept on the office floor for 2 nights straight, sorting replies and managing potential risks. Because once something like this goes public, it doesn't stay a short clip. People make it their story. They project their experiences, their wounds, their hopes. "I've been silenced before too," wrote one woman, like someone saying I didn't belong in that room. Jasmine read that message twice. She hadn't asked for this spotlight, not in this way, but she wasn't the kind of woman to look away when it found her. While Melania remained publicly silent, the media began to dig. A reporter from the Portland Tribune published a seemingly minor but consequential detail. An internal email revealed that Melania's team had requested, gently but clearly, that Jasmine not be seated directly beside her. No ultimatum, just a preference. But it spoke volumes. The suspicion grew. This story didn't begin in the studio. What the public didn't know was that there was already an unspoken history between the 2 women. Over a year earlier, at a private charity event in Naples, Florida, no cameras, no press corps, just hand-picked guests, quiet conversations, soft power. Jasmine had only recently entered Congress. Her presence was strategic, potential donors, bipartisan contacts. She wore a turquoise blazer, clutching talking points in her bag, speaking with intent about her bill to expand healthcare access in underserved communities. What she didn't expect was Melania Trump. The First Lady arrived with only 2 aides, a rare sight at unofficial appearances. They met by chance at the bar. Jasmine was polite. "Good evening," Melania nodded. "Congresswoman," Jasmine casually outlined the healthcare initiative. Melania listened. "That is your work." The tone was neutral. But then she added, "Some smile, some shout. That doesn't make one more sincere than the other." Then a quiet follow-up. "If you want to gain influence, you might want to learn what tone a room prefers." Those words stayed with her. Jasmine hadn't replied then, but she remembered every detail, the look, the voice, the smile, and she told her advisor Dion afterward, "If I ever see her in public again and she talks to me like that, I won't stay quiet." It wasn't anger, it was resolve. And that's why the whisper in the studio didn't feel random. It felt like the echo of a conversation that had never truly ended. Later, sitting in her apartment, Jasmine stared at the muted television. The clip looped endlessly on nearly every channel. The whisper, Melania's glance, her own line, then the tweet, now quoted like a political manifesto. She sipped her cold coffee as her phone vibrated like a pinball machine. Messages from staff, calls from donors, even a few celebrities asking if she wanted to go live on Instagram. But Jasmine wasn't ready to play the game, at least not yet. Across the room, Dayon sat on the floor scrolling through news feeds, filtering social mentions. Her voice was calm, but her eyes moved fast. "You're trending again," she said without looking up. #2 in the US, just behind the NFL scandal." Jasmine gave a dry laugh. "Then I should probably thank her." Dion lifted her head. "You don't need to respond. You already did." 10 words, Jasmine murmured. "That's all it takes now." She stood and walked to the window. The streets of Arlington lay quiet below. Cars at intersections, people with takeout bags, teenagers under a flickering street lamp. Ordinary life. But her life was anything but ordinary. She thought back to that moment on the panel, when Melania leaned in. It hadn't felt accidental, more like a rehearsed line delivered with just enough sweetness to mask the content. It hadn't frightened her, not really, but it had triggered something old. When Jasmine was 15, her English teacher once pulled her aside after class. "Maybe you should tone it down a little. People aren't used to that kind of energy from someone like you." She hadn't said black. She hadn't said girl. But Jasmine had heard it between the lines. And now, years later, it felt the same, except this time the whole country was watching. Her phone vibrated again. A name appeared that she hadn't seen in years. Ruthie Miles. They'd interned together in 2010, before Jasmine went to law school and Ruthie moved into a DC consulting firm. Ruthie had a memory like an elephant and no filter. Jasmine answered. "Girl," Ruthie said immediately, "you need to be careful." "Nice to hear from you too," Jasmine replied dryly. "I'm serious. They're already twisting it. They're making it seem like you provoked her." "I didn't even say anything." "Exactly the problem," Ruthie said. "You didn't have to. You're the target now, not just politically, personally." Jasmine sank onto her couch, staring into the void. "Do you think it was a threat?" Ruthie paused briefly, then slower. "I think she said exactly what she meant, and I think you scared her, without trying." The call ended soon after, but the words lingered. "You scared her. Maybe that was the problem." The next day, reporters waited outside every door on Capitol Hill, outside hearing rooms, in parking garages, by the elevators. They weren't asking if Jasmine would respond. They were asking when. Would she file a formal complaint? But Jasmine wasn't chasing the press. Not yet. Instead, she wrote a letter, not to Melania, not to the media, but to her constituents. Handwritten, scanned, and posted online. "I was elected to speak the truth, not to whisper behind cameras. I won't change that, not out of deference to power or position. If that's considered loud, so be it." The post went viral. Tens of thousands shared it. Celebrities reposted it. But what mattered most were the comments from strangers, teachers, nurses, grandmothers, young girls. "You're the reason I started paying attention." My daughter printed that out and taped it to her mirror. I got chills. Jasmine wasn't looking to win headlines. She wanted to reclaim her story. But Melania's silence wasn't an accident, and while the media danced on the surface, someone was already digging deeper. The leaks, the email, the seating preference. And then, Angela Russo. Angela had never meant to become part of the story. She'd grown up in Passaic, New Jersey, the daughter of a supermarket cashier who worked double shifts. Her interest in journalism had started with sports coverage. She loved how a well-edited clip could move people. But lately, she'd been thinking about something else. How often powerful people said things never meant to be heard. Because it was too late. Because no one should hear it. Because it would be buried. When she heard Melania's words, she recognized the tone. She'd heard it before, when someone told her mother she wasn't leadership material. When someone told her she didn't have the right presence to be on camera. She knew it was risky, but she clicked save, then send. And then, fire. The station called an emergency meeting. No names were mentioned. But everyone knew. Someone had leaked an internal clip. The production manager spoke of breach of protocol, possible disciplinary action. Angela said nothing, not out of guilt, but out of clarity. That evening, she received an anonymous text. Respect. Don't talk to the press. Don't trust silence. No name, no number. Her roommate Jade advised her to wipe her hard drive. Angela changed her passwords. But she didn't back down, because she knew something had shifted. Within 72 hours, the clip hadn't just shaken the internet, it had rattled the nation's political institutions. In the halls of the House of Representatives, the atmosphere had palpably changed, not because of the whisper itself, but because of what it had triggered. A wave, a magnifying glass, an uncomfortable truth. When Jasmine Crockett entered the House chamber, she wore a burgundy pantsuit and showed no expression. Her movements were as focused as ever, but this time the stares were sharper, some curious, some admiring, some frosty. She took her seat without a word. Across the aisle, Brent Allward, congressman from Kansas, stood just before a vote on defense funding. He didn't mention a name. He didn't have to. We should remember what true civility means, even in private conversations. Heads turned. Jasmine's gaze remained steady. Later in the Capitol rotunda, reporters asked, "Congresswoman, do you believe the First Lady should apologize?" Jasmine smiled only with her eyes. "I think the First Lady knows exactly what she said." Then she walked away. The White House stayed silent. But sources from the East Wing confirmed Melania was disappointed, not in herself but in the public reaction. Internal memos showed her team believed Jasmine had exploited a private moment for political gain. The debate evolved. TV shows invited psychologists, body language experts, former political advisors. Some speculated on personal motives. Others claimed it was coincidence, that Melania hadn't known the mic was live. But that theory didn't hold. The glance, the lean, the timing, it didn't feel accidental. Then another detail surfaced. Melania had mentioned Jasmine's name multiple times in private meetings, not overtly critical, but questioning. Is she too confrontational? Do her words help or just escalate? Does everything have to become a fight? Such questions sound harmless, but in the right circles, repeated often enough, they plant doubt. Riley Sharp, a mid-level network manager, began reviewing internal emails and production notes. He found the original seating request from Melania's team. Please avoid placing Rep. Crockett next to Mrs. Trump if possible. Not an order, not a red line, but it said everything. Riley chose not to forward the document. He'd heard the whisper too, and he knew some things are better left unsaid, not because they're false, but because they're true. Meanwhile, public attention gradually shifted toward the leaker. Who had released the clip? Why? Was it an accident or a decision? Angela Russo remained anonymous, but under a pseudonym on a blog, she wrote, "Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is let people hear each other." The line went viral, and while journalists kept digging, politicians responded, and platforms recycled content, something deeper took root. Conversations that politics rarely starts. In a hair salon in Glendale, Arizona, two women in their 60s argued, was Melania's whisper maternal or manipulative? In a classroom in Madison, Wisconsin, a teacher used Jasmine's open letter to spark discussion on intent and impact. A podcast from Omaha posed the question, why are women expected to be either quiet, polite, or dangerous, but never all at once? The story became a mirror. Some saw themselves in Jasmine, some in Melania, many in both. The composed, the outspoken, the ones who stay silent to avoid conflict, the ones who speak knowing conflict will follow. But beyond personalities, the story revealed something much deeper, how power expresses itself. Melania had spent years learning how to navigate in the shadows of powerful men, how to choose decorum over confrontation, to influence without directly opposing. That was her armor. Jasmine had to fight her way into every room. She had been told she was too loud, too much, too difficult. Her voice wasn't just a weapon, it was her shield, her right. And so one whispered sentence became a confrontation between generations, styles, and definitions of power. But it wasn't over yet, because weeks later both women were invited to the same event again, this time a private dinner in Dallas. No microphones, no cameras, no audience, just conversation. The invitation came from the Harrington Foundation, known for elite, discreet networking events. Melania had attended twice before. Jasmine never had, until now. The location? A grand hall at the Dallas Arboretum, typically used for weddings and banquets. 50 guests, pre-assigned seating, preset discussion topics, everything low-key, everything significant. Jasmine arrived early, wearing a dark green dress, no team, no press. She didn't want it to look like she needed backup to walk into a room she already belonged in. Melania arrived 20 minutes later, elegant as ever, 2 assistants, no visible Secret Service. Champagne-colored blouse, flowing skirt, a face of perfect calm. They were placed at separate tables, 2 tables apart, just enough distance to appear neutral, just enough to ensure they were still seen. During dessert, Jasmine stood up and quietly walked toward the corridor. Moments later, Melania followed. The hallway was dimly lit, lined with black and white photos of past events. Voices from the main room came only faintly through the double doors. Melania spoke first. "You write beautifully," she said, her voice calm, no edge. Jasmine turned. "Thank you." A pause. Melania looked directly at her. "You believe I threatened you." "I believe you said what you meant," Jasmine replied. Melania nodded slowly. "I meant, be careful. It's a dangerous space. Words carry weight." Jasmine stepped closer. "And yet, your words came when the cameras were off. That's what matters." Melania's voice softened. "You don't know what it's like when every move is watched, judged, distorted." Jasmine exhaled. "I do. But the difference is, I never had the privilege of silence being seen as grace." Melania looked at her for a long time. No anger, no defense, just stillness. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, "but I don't regret saying it." "Then you meant it," Jasmine said plainly. Melania didn't respond immediately. Then came a line Jasmine didn't expect. "I admire you," she said quietly, "even if I don't agree with your methods." Jasmine tilted her head slightly. "That's not the word I expected." Melania continued, "I admire what I can't do. You speak without fear. I learned to survive by choosing silence." Between them, a new silence formed, not threatening, no cynicism, no rivalry, just 2 women from seemingly different worlds, connected in an unexpected way. "I'm not fearless," Jasmine finally said. "I just learned that silence doesn't protect people like me." Melania nodded, slowly, almost as if she were hearing that sentence for the first time. There was no hug, no handshake, just a moment where both women carried more than they would ever publicly say. Then Melania turned and walked back to the ballroom. Jasmine followed shortly after. At the tables, nothing seemed to have changed, but something had shifted, internally, and this time, the silence between them was mutual. On social media, the speculation didn't stop. Was there a meeting? Did they talk? What was said? Rumors flew, articles speculated, but no one knew for sure. Only the 2 of them did. And for now, that was enough. Yet while the world obsessed over the hot mic moment, a much deeper question emerged. What does it say about the way we communicate, about the weight of a whisper? Because that moment had become something more than a media event. It had become a mirror. The whisper was replayed, parodied, analyzed endlessly. It became shorthand, a hot mic moment. People said, and everyone knew what they meant. Universities hosted seminars on coded language and politics. NGOs used Jasmine's open letter in leadership training. In political circles, "Be careful who you call out" became an ironic in-joke, with serious meaning. But what remained wasn't the scandal. It was the conversation, what it had triggered, a confrontation with everything we often leave unsaid. In salons, classrooms, community centers, people asked, why do quiet comments hit harder than loud speeches? Why does a whisper feel more threatening than a shout? And why are women always forced to choose between conformity and rebellion? Melania had learned to use elegance as armor, to occupy space without noise, to influence without defiance. Jasmine had sharpened her voice because she was told it was too much. Her voice wasn't just a tool, it was her survival. And so, this wasn't just a clash of personalities. It was a collision of ways to move through power. The media moved on, as always. New headlines, new scandals, new faces. But the clip stayed, not as breaking news, but as a memory. It resurfaced again and again, not because it was current, but because it still mattered. In schools, in sermons, in political debates. Jasmine Crockett was no longer just a headline. She had become a symbol. Her words, "I won't change for power or position," were printed out, taped to fridges, pinned in classrooms, carried in hearts. A teenage girl in Toledo quoted her in a student council speech. A grandmother in Sacramento printed her open letter. A pastor in Birmingham folded her lines into a sermon. It wasn't about fame anymore. It was about resonance. Because the real question was never about being loud or quiet, but when, how, and to whom we speak. The real power wasn't in the whisper, but in what we do with it. In offices, classrooms, homes, we sit in conversations we didn't start, where someone says just enough for us to hear, but not enough to be held accountable. A comment in a meeting, a joke at dinner, a whisper that questions our presence. And the question becomes, do we ignore it, smile, whisper back, or like Jasmine, turn it into something louder, not in tone, but in truth? Melania's microphone moment wasn't just politics. It was memory, warning, possibility. It showed how fragile control can be, how quickly a moment can slip away, and how powerful a voice is when it isn't just heard but felt. Angela Russo left the station a month later. No public statement, no interview, just one last anonymous post. Sometimes the most honest thing you can do is let people hear each other. Jasmine kept speaking, not louder, not angrier, just clearer. Her next speech in the House didn't name names, no events mentioned, just one line, echoed across social media. My voice may disrupt, but I wasn't elected to whisper. And Melania? She stayed silent, returned to her curated agenda, school visits, speeches, photos, but according to sources close to her, she had become quieter in private, not regretful, just more cautious. And maybe that was the real lesson. Not all power is loud, but every voice matters when it's honest. And so the moment remained as memory, as message, and as a quiet answer to a loud world.